Hello guys and welcome to episode 41 of the Beat Your Backlog Podcast, a podcast discussing the things gamers like to put off, get to another day, and oh yes, will definitely beat later, their backlog. I'm your host Adam and today we are sailing the Purribean in the Gentle Bros pawsome indie RPG Cat Quest III. And I actually have quite a little bit of history with the Cat Quest series, having reviewed both of the first two games and given them a 6 out of 10 on Switch IndieFix. I think the original Cat Quest game, it was like one of the first big indie breakouts back then on the Nintendo Switch when the console didn't really have many games and it was like kind of like an indie machine. It was one that it was also, I think, one of the first games I got a review code for back then, so I was like really proud of myself that, oh my god, I got a review code for a game. And yeah, they were both fun games, but ultimately just sort of like fine games, like small indies. And like I said, I think the timing of them for the game and for the developers was perfect because they came out on the Switch when the Switch didn't have many games. So to be honest with you, I wasn't really that interested in trying out this new cat venture of Cat Quest III. However, after seeing Echo Absi's review on NintendoLife.com, in which he stated, so Cat Quest III is a familiar yet flawless action adventure with fluid and fantastic feeling combat. Its charming story and witty writing bring life to the Purribean, one of the best designed open world in recent memory. And then he goes on to say, all of that together ensures that Cat Quest III is a pristine pirate adventure and action RPG, quite simply one of the best indie games of the year. And this really got my indie game loving whiskers tingling, because yeah, like I said, I had experience with the previous two games, thought they were okay, and I was like, okay, I have to try this out and play the game. So let's find out if Cat Quest III is truly one of the best indie games of the year, or if it belongs at the bottom of the ocean in Davy Dog's locker in this week's episode of the Beat Your Backlog Podcast. But before we start, let me remind you to follow the episode wherever you're listening, and please give us a 5-star review. Now let's weigh the anchor and get on with the show. So, what is Cat Quest III? Well, if you don't know the Cat Quest games, you may not be surprised to find out that you play as a bipedal cat that runs around in it's kind of like a sort of Final Fantasy styled overworld map. On the map, there are towns, caves, enemies, and NPCs you can interact with, and best of all, there are lots and lots and lots of chests full of loot that you can find or earn by solving puzzles. The map in this game, and I think this is kind of the standout for the Cat Quest games in general, is very, very unique. It has like a 2.5D perspective, but it has like an isometric view. And you play as a cat that can kind of move around in any direction you want, any of the 8 directions, I guess, that you would have on a joystick, or maybe it's 16, I can't remember. And yeah, you kind of interact with this world in this very interesting way. If you don't know the game, I suggest you just watch the trailer or look up some screenshots, because it is visually a very interesting looking game and very unique. And yeah, actually what they've done quite well in this game, which Casper, who we'll talk about a bit later, pointed out, is they have dropped the camera down in this game compared to the other ones. So the other ones was almost kind of top down looking, whereas this one is more isometric, and I think the reason that they dropped this down is so that you can see more of the world, which I think is a great decision, because it gives you a bit more of a drive to explore since you can see more cool things on the horizon. And this time around in the game, you play as a pirate sailing the beautiful blue waters of the Purribean on a quest to find the North Star treasure. And I think the first game was meant to be based on like Skyrim. You kind of play as like a dragonborn in that one. It's very medieval. And then the second game is also sort of medieval with swords and wizards, but you play a little bit later on, like kind of like the late medieval period. And yeah, this one we're playing as a pirate. And the game starts out pretty quickly with our main character and their companion, Captain Cappy, who is a sort of like cute cat version of a ghost from Destiny. So he's like this glowing blue orb that follows you around, and he has like a captain's hat and like an eye patch over his eye. And the two of you are taking on a pack of the villainous pirates, and you're trying to steal their ship. The pirates are led by a very Bane-looking pirate king, who is also on the hunt for the North Star treasure, which is said to grant whoever finds it whatever wish they want. The story is broken up into 2 areas, each of which has a main dungeon to conquer. But to enter the dungeon, very Zelda-like, you have to find 3 keys that are scattered around the map, and they could be hidden in caves or enemy camps, or you might have to do a puzzle to find them. With the original 2 Cat Quest games, my biggest sort of criticism and complaint was that I felt like the main quest was very dull and very kind of linear, and just didn't really have as much sort of personality as a lot of the side quests do. But happily I can say in Cat Quest III, I really enjoyed the main quest. I think it's very fun. I think the change of the pirate theme is great, and also being able to sail around the 2.5D map is a fantastic addition to the game, and it definitely elevated the story above the first 2. This was mostly, I think, because the main story has a lot of these kind of cool, quirky, and light-hearted characters, which I think in the previous games was kind of saved for the side quests. So yeah, in Cat Quest 3, you have these 2 characters, these 2 rat characters called Squeak and Clean. Squeak is this really small, like kind of ship's hand rat who has a mop on his head and obviously cleans stuff up, and Clean is this big kind of barrel-chested sort of brute of a rat who has a very kind of interesting contrast to Squeak, because all he says is clean, and they kind of pop up all the time, and it was always kind of a joy when they did pop up, because the humor and sort of the writing around them was very good. And then you also have the Pirate King. And again, like, he's an interesting character, very interesting character design. Like I said, he's kind of like Bane. He has like these tubes of, it looks like poisonous gas going straight into his mouth, and he's kind of almost sort of goggle-like eyes, and he's obviously a rat and a pirate, so very cool character design. And I actually, even though the story is silly and it's kind of like a cartoon cat game, his reasoning for wanting this North Star treasure is actually quite endearing. So I was kind of like surprised that like by the end of the story, you were kind of like, I actually like this guy. You know, he's doing this for understandable reasons. Furthermore, the game also is littered with kind of silly but hilarious characters. So there is kind of a pirate group called the Octopuses, and they are all cat-themed octopuses or octopus-themed cats. And for whatever reason, they're all Japanese, and whenever they come onto the screen, they burst out of the water shouting wasabi, which just felt very, very random, but also just very funny. However, yeah, my favorite character in the main quest and probably in the game is a character called Captain Meowtalica, so like Metallica, but Meowtalica. He's a heavy metal loving, guitar shredding pirate that uses lightning attacks. And this guy, whenever he came on, he always talks in song, so which was quite funny. And like I said, it was kind of a very interesting twist to be in a kind of pirate themed game, but have this character in all black leather with like metal studs and has like an axe that's shaped like a guitar. Very interesting character design again. And I think the Cat Quest games, they've always had very interesting characters, but this game, Cat Quest III, just creatively with its character design goes above and beyond with its zany, memorable characters. And that's just not just in the main quest. So, like I said, in the other 2 games, I actually preferred the side quests. I thought they were very Easter egg themed and full, and a lot of them were based on other games. So, like in the first game, I remember the one of the side quests was about Kara Loft, so obviously Lara Croft, and a lot of the other games, like I felt like the side quests felt multi sort of leveled. Like what you were actually doing in them was quite basic, but you were always kind of building a story. And I think that's the case too in Cat Quest 3, because the side quests are still very good and have become more like based on dungeons. So for example, there is an 8-bit castle dungeon in the game, which is obviously inspired by the Castlevania games, and is really cool when you get there, because it puts kind of like a filter on the screen that looks like pixel art. Then there is another one called Love Per Castle, which really kind of shakes things up in it, because you have to go out and find these free, I can't remember if they're romance books or if they're diaries, but anyway, you have to go out and find these free books, which are hidden around the Purribean, and once found, you can enter the books yourself, and you have like this kind of make your own story, love story, about this character called Clawford, who is a ghost who lost his love, and you find out about their story, about Clawford and Priscilla, in these books, and then at the end you have to fight like Shade Clawford, which is really really interesting. And of course, there's lots more side quests in the game. I don't want to spoil them all. I would say those are like the 2 standout main ones. But yeah, they're just like very fun, simple tasks to do, but have very well written stories and interesting characters. And it's one of the things that we'll keep talking about the game that kind of adds to the addictive feeling of the game. And I think it's having the side quests was one of the reasons why I kind of burnt through the game, which we'll talk about soon as well. But before we do that, we'll go talk about the combat. So again, if you don't know the Cat Quest games, probably good to tell you what the combat is like. So the combat is very reminiscent of old school 2D Zelda games. So I was playing on Xbox, and how the Xbox One worked was you had a melee attack on X, and melee attacks usually, depending on what weapon you had some kind of combo, like free tap combo. Then you had range attacks on Y, which depending on what you had in this game, I don't think they had guns in any of the other games. I think it's new to this one that you have guns, but you also have like magical staffs as well. And then on A, you have a dodge roll, which to me felt very unnatural, because for some reason I always associate dodge rolling with B. I don't know if that's because the game that really introduced the dodge roll to me was Enter the Gungeon, and I think that's on B. So yeah, it felt a bit weird pressing it on A, but whatever. So those are the kind of your main attacks, and then as you progress further into the game, you unlock magical spells, which you can then kind of put on your trigger and bumper buttons, so you can have 4 different spells, and yeah, you can use those anytime. And actually at the start of the game, I found the combat quite difficult, because I think for some reason I assumed the game was a bit more like hack and slashy than it actually is. I just assumed that if you just kept attacking, you would kind of stun lock an enemy, which meant they wouldn't attack you back. And how wrong I was, because that isn't the case. So what would happen is I'd stun lock, and then enemies would attack me and end up killing me. So yeah, there is actually like a bit of skill to the combat. It's really about like waiting for enemy attacks, recognizing their patterns, moving out of the way. Then it's also about using your magical abilities. So a lot of the magical abilities, they might be like an AoE ability that you can leave on the floor, or there might be more direct. So direct attacks that you can see little lines on the floor where it's going to attack to as you cast them. So it's about like trying to line up the enemies perfectly in your attack radius so that you hit them. So yeah, there is a little bit of depth to the combat, but it is still quite simple. Like, it's very just basic sort of combat that everyone, as soon as you see it, you'll understand it, if you know what I mean. The other thing that made it hard was that there are some very tough enemies at the start of the game, because you unlock the ship pretty much from the start, and with the ship it means you can go wherever you want on the map. But you are kind of then like level locked to the enemies there. So it might be that you can go to a new island and land on the island and explore a little bit, but as soon as you face an enemy, the enemy might be 50 levels higher than you are. So as a little tip, if you're planning on playing the game, it's probably best that you stay around the starting area at the start of the game, do all of the quests there, level up and find yourself some good loot, and then it'll help you out in the long run. But there is a new layer of combat in Cat Quest III, and that is of course the naval combat. Like I just said, you get a ship, so you do get to fight on the seas. The combat here again is quite simple. As you start out, you just have a single attack, a single cannonball, which is also on X. But as you kind of explore the world and beat dungeons, open chests, you find kind of upgrade blueprints, which you can use to increase things like the ship's speed, the defense of the hull, the amount of ammunition you can shoot, and then also as you beat kind of powerful enemies, you unlock new attacks for your ship. And again, just like the kind of the regular combat, you can put these on the bumper and trigger buttons, or triggers, I guess. You can put them on there, so it is limited to what attacks you can use, and also there is only a certain number of upgrades you can have at one time, and it increases on your level. So I think at the end you can have like 10 if you get to level 65. So yeah, it also is a little bit like you have to kind of pick and choose what you want to use. Do you want to have a strong attack, or would you rather have more defense? Things like that. In general, I think the ship combat felt okay. We'll talk a little bit later about when we talk about the loot, about the builds that you can have in the regular combat. But in the the ship combat, I didn't really think there was a way to make a build like you can in the regular. So, for example, if you fought against another ship and kept getting defeated by them, there wasn't really a way where I felt like, okay, if I tweak this or use this new weapon, I'll be able to beat them. It was really like the only way that you could then beat them was to go off, grind for levels until you were the same level as a ship or higher, and then come back and beat it that way. So yeah, I think the naval combat was a really good first attempt in this game, but I'm interested to see how the Gentle Bros can iterate on it if it reappears again in the next game. So yeah, talking about the loot, and the loot loop in Cat Quest 3 is definitely the best in all of the 3 Cat Quest games so far. It's the first game where it felt like you could make a build, like I said before, for your character by combining armor, weapons, charms, and spells. So for example, you can find an armor and sword set that does damage to you. Does damage to enemies every time you heal. So if you have healing spells, you can basically use the healing spells and the armor to do massive damage to your enemies, whilst also healing yourself. And there are lots of armor sets that do exactly this. Like there's one where a fisherman one where if you wear it, you get like, actually that does help with the ship. You get more attack, more damage on the water. There's one where there's like a fire one, there's an electric one, which if you use certain weapons, you get lots and lots of electric kind of lightning bolts coming down and hitting enemies. So it really feels like you can kind of tweak and change stuff, basically depending on what enemies you're fighting. So yeah, at the start of the game, I used this kind of this healing mechanic to do damage to enemies, and then later on, I actually ended up using the lightning one, which was really cool. And I think this extra layer just really made the combat, even though a lot of it is the same as the first 2 games, it makes it really more engaging to play, because it reminds me of like a full RPG, not just like an action RPG or an RPG like, where you can see there are items designed to work with one another, and you kind of feel clever for noticing that. And in this game it's very simplified, but you're kind of like, well, I know if I use this item, it will give me an extra lightning bolt attack if I use this weapon. So then you put them together, and then you layer on like the like I said, the magical abilities or another piece of armor, and then you have like a really, really powerful build, which is really good. And the kind of loot loop just keeps going throughout the game. So in the previous games, I thought there was not a great variation of loot to find. Like it felt very, very much that very quickly you were finding doubles of the items you already had. And this would upgrade the items that you already had. So it wasn't like you were just getting nothing. It was like the armor and weapons you already were using were improving. But it did become very kind of boring and frustrating every time you opened a chest and just got something that you already had. But yeah, happily this isn't the case in Cat Quest 3. I think it's like a really good balance between the loot of finding new and interesting items, where again it kind of makes you think that if I use this and I use that, then this will happen, which the other 2 games didn't have. But you also do get some repeats, but it does feel like it's nicely paced. Like it feels more like the repeats are kind of been drip fed to you, whereas the new items have been poured on you all the time, which is really nice. So it made every chest that you found exciting to open, because you're like, okay, what interesting item am I going to get? And it also made sort of, which we'll talk about later, it made like continuing playing the game, like just the addictiveness of the game. It added that layer because you were always on the hunt for new chests because you wanted to get new items. So yeah, so that was kind of like the combat, the core aspects of the game and the story. Next, we're going to talk about how gorgeous the graphics look in the game. But before we do, I'd like to remind you that if you're enjoying the podcast, please leave us a 5-star review on Spotify and follow us there if you aren't doing so already. Yeah, let's get on with the rest of the show. So yeah, it's interesting because when I first played Cat Quest 2, I looked at the graphics and I was like, yeah, this is how I remember Cat Quest. Like, I thought it looked exactly the same as the original. And it wasn't until I was writing my review that I had like a screenshot of the original game and the second one, and I was like, oh yeah, you can see that it's more detailed and that it's like a higher quality than the original game was. But upon starting Cat Quest 3, this really was not the case. It's like as soon as you enter the game, you can see, well, first off, you get like a really beautifully animated cutscene, and then you go kind of enter the Purribean for the first time, and you can just tell that this game is like multiple steps above its predecessors, and I think in general it's one of the prettiest games of 2024. And like I was talking about before, the drop in the camera shows off more of the stunning world with its crystal clear waters, lush mountaintops. And what's really cool is there is like a shift in the game from having everything being kind of like 2D illustrated to having like 3D elements on the map. So this is mostly the landscape of the islands, and I think it's really good because it has like this contrast between the landscape of the islands being 3D and then having like the gorgeous kind of 2D art and characters for the characters in the building. And I think the 3Dness really helps push out the detail of the 2D art, which is really cool, because a lot of the 3D, the landscape, it looks beautiful, but it feels very painterly. Like there's not a lot of detail on them. It really feels like, or looks like they're like artist paintbrushes where they've done the first layer of the mountain green and then just added touches of light green and yellow on top. So yeah, it really pushes out the 2D characters. And yeah, furthermore, your ship is a 3D asset as well, and it's kind of in a 2.5D world, which is very reminiscent of the Paper Mario series, which is, I think, one of the best looking series ever. So props to Cat Quest and to the Gentle Bros, because they made a really beautiful looking game. And the gorgeous graphics are matched perfectly by the music in the game. The sea shanties fit perfectly to the world and give the game a nice upbeat feeling. And in addition, there's a really cool dynamic aspect to the soundtrack, which shifts the tone and tempo of the track from land to sea. So on land, it's a little bit slower. And then in the sea, as soon as you get in the sea, it feels a bit more dramatic and a bit more like up, like, I don't know, like you're about to go fight a kraken or something like that. Like it's really, really cool how it works. And yeah, the main tune of the game is just very, very catchy and addictive. And I found myself multiple times humming it to myself as I washed the dishes, which I think is a sign of how good the melodies are. And yeah, the music isn't the only thing that's addicted about the game. I've kind of foreshadowed this a little bit throughout the review so far, but I absolutely, I think the only way to say it is like I consumed Cat Quest III. Like I bought it and within 3 days of buying it, I'd finished the game, and that is something that I don't typically do. Like it's typically, I play a couple of hours here, a couple of hours there, which might suggest that the game is quite short, but I don't think it is. I think it's about 10 hours to beat it. And yeah, I think it's just that when I was playing it, I was in the zone, in the game, and yeah, that's why I beat it so quickly. And in game design, there is kind of like a saying that a new game is split into 3 parts. So 1/3 of it is something that the player already knows, which I would say in Cat Quest is the combat from the original games. Another third is that you improve on something that the player already knows. So in Cat Quest 3, I think this is like the fine-tuning of the main quest, the kind of fine-tuning of the loot, and also the polishing of the graphics and just making it look absolutely stunning. And then the final third, is innovation. So you add something new to it, which is obviously the ship mechanic of the game. And I think Cat Quest III's design kind of epitomizes this perfectly. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but I think because like 2/3 of the game are something players already know, I think it means it's like a kind of game that you can just kind of sit back on the sofa and just shut off your brain and play. It's just something that, like I said, like a lot of the game isn't really anything new. Like the combat is, like I said, something that as soon as you see it, you'll understand it. There are lots of side quests, and the main quest has really good writing and is really funny, but the actual mechanics of what you're doing is more or less just fetch quests, like go here, get this thing and come back, or go here and fight these enemies and come back. There's not really a lot of puzzles in the sense of, I have to move a block here to pull a lever, to open a door, to jump down onto a ledge. There's nothing really like that. It's just sort of like you go into caves and you just have to work out how to find a button to press it to open the door and then to get to the next part of the caves. It's very simple. So it's just something that it kept reminding me of like comfort food. Like it's just a game that you can play without really having any stress or challenge. It's something that is easy. It's like something that you like. And I think this kind of culminates because of its kind of cuteness in the character designs, its accessible mechanics, and its charming story, plus the fantastic loop of the loot. Like you're just always constantly wanting to get new chests, to get new loot, to keep upgrading. It really made the hours melt away for me, and is what makes Cat Quest III a perfect chill out game in my opinion. And I think this is kind of epitomized then in that after the game, after I finished the story, it left me really wanting more. I was like, I'm kind of like, oh, I can't believe this is over. And this sort of segues into a question from Casper from the Beat Your Backlog Discord. If you're interested in joining the Discord, the link will be in the description. And Casper is playing Cat Quest 3. And he asked, did I complete any of the Cat Quest games 100%? And if not, would I go back and complete them now? What I was saying with Cat Quest 3 is I did not 100% it, but I did go back and continue playing the game after finishing the main story, because there were still some quest lines that I wanted to finish off. So there was the Mama Milker's quest, where each of the kind of main side characters, so there's Mama Milker, there is I can't remember his name, there's the blacksmith, and then there's also the mage. They have like items hidden out in the world that if you find the item and bring it back to them, it kind of gives them a side quest, and then if you go and do it, they will give you some kind of reward for doing it, which is really cool. So I didn't do hers, but I did want to do hers. And the other thing I really wanted to do was finish off the bounty board. So in Mama Milker's pub, she's like this like swole sailor woman that owns a pub where they sell pints of milk. And then on the board, it's very much like One Piece. There are these bounty sort of wanted posters of these different pirates with a different bounty amount on them. And I had one left to do, and I was like, yeah, I want to kind of do that to just mostly get the achievement for it. So yeah, the Mama Milker's quest I did actually manage to do, which was really fun, and I suggest Casper that you do it. But the bounty I never ended up doing, because the enemy, the final enemy, was 20 levels higher than I was at the end of the game, and I really didn't want to have to just grind up the 20 levels to beat it. And also, yeah, the enemy is a ship. I don't want to spoil it, but you can go into the pub and look yourself what the enemy is. So like I said before, I didn't think the game really added up enough customization for the ship combat, where I thought, okay, I can maybe cheese it a little bit if I use this attack, shoot it, sail away, then come back, shoot it again. So I didn't go back and finish it in that way. But I did also, I did look through the achievements, because I always do when I start a new game, just to see what they are. And I think a lot of them do seem quite doable if you kind of play with a guide and don't really mind grinding. But yeah, for me right now, there are so many good games coming out or already out that I was kind of happy to finish the game where I was. And I don't really go back to play. I don't really plan to go back to play the others. Unless you want to team up for co-op, which then also leads us on to a question from Andrew on Twitter. So Andrew Valentine, he asked, "How is the co-op?" That is the one thing I didn't try. I should have tried it probably with my wife, but like I said, I was just so sort of in the zone of the game and just enjoying it so much that I was like, I don't want to slow down my momentum by trying to co-op. But yeah, maybe that's something me and Casper can try out, because we are both in Vienna. So we'll let you know, Andrew. And also I guess Andrew has another question about are there abilities / gear to be found outside of the main story, which kind of also goes into Casper's story about going back after the game. Yes, there are. There is like a kind of legendary weapon that you can find, which also I think if you do it affects the story a little bit. So you can do it after the story if you want, but you can also do it before the end of the story. And if you do it before, it skips a fight with someone that otherwise you would have to fight. So you basically fight them then as you go and get this item for this special weapon, rather than right before the end of the story. So yeah, if there is, and I think there are a lot of things like that where, at least in the other games, that there are lots and lots of different side quests with lots and lots of different items to find. So if you do want to continue playing afterwards, there is definitely content to do. There's also something called, I think it's called the Infinity Tower, which is sort of like I wouldn't call it a boss rush, but it's like an enemy rush mode where there are different levels to it, and on each level different enemies spawn, and you have a timer of 2 minutes, and every time you beat a floor, the timer resets. Or not resets, sorry, it gets time added to it. So it's kind of like a challenge mode where you can see how far down this tower you can go, or how high you can go, I suppose would make more sense. So it does offer a little bit of replayability there, and it's also you do get XP in the tower, so that's kind of like a good way to grind. So if I did want to go back and fight this final bounty that we were talking about with Casper's question, I probably would have gone there and just ran through the tower over and over again until I managed to get up to level 80, but I decided I didn't want to do that. So the game does have a lot of post story content, which is great, and it has the co-op mode, which I didn't play yet. And since we're on questions, finally, another one from Casper. He says he's playing the game. He thinks he'll finish it in the next couple of days. And he doesn't know if a sequel's been hinted at, but if there is one, what do you think it will be about? And how will the Gentle Bros iterate on the Cat Quest series again? And I think, this is a good question, because I assume this would be the last game in the series. But I do think there will, after finishing the story, I do think there will be another game in the series, which then will probably be the last. How they iterate on it is a really good question, because I think they are iterating, and like I talked about before, I think they are slowly iterating on it. So they're adding like now they added the ship mechanic. One thing that I think would be cool for me is I think they could kind of improve the size of the next game's map, especially if they stick with a sort of ship mechanic. Because you get the ship so early, I felt like you see everything really quickly in the game, and then it makes the map kind of feel small, because as you progress to the story, you're already visiting places that you've already been to. So I think it would be really cool if the map was a bit bigger. Like, I would have loved it if the current size of the map in Cat Quest III was like the first area of the game. And kind of like, again, I don't really know that much about One Piece, but I know that in One Piece there are these different sort of areas of the ocean that he goes to, and it's kind of like feels very video gamey. Like, this is area 1, and he beats the final boss in area 1 and goes to the next area. That something like that would be cool, where it's kind of like, okay, I've done area 1, now there's a whole new area which is like the same size or bigger that I need to go to. And I think this isn't a spoiler, this is just my personal thinking about the game, because they had the original game, like I said, was kind of fantasy, medieval, and the second game was sort of medieval-ish. This one is set in the pirate era. That I imagine the next game will be set also like in another time frame, like in the future, but I can't really think of like a time frame that would work as like kind of like a more modern time frame. Like, I can't imagine that they put modern guns in this game, or have it really like set in, I don't know, like World War II or something like that. So I personally think the next game will be set like in the really distant future, where all of this stuff will have happened to the world. There'll have been some war between cats and dogs, and you're kind of playing in the space age, which I think would be cool, because then maybe you could have a spaceship that is you use to move around, and instead of them being islands, maybe there's like different planets that you can land on. I think that would be really cool, just to really make the game feel bigger and like level it up as an RPG. And the other thing I think they need to iterate on is the combat. Like I said, I think they did it nicely in this game with the sort of the items and the armor and weapons being able to create builds with them. But the actual combat itself, the mechanic of the combat, is very basic. It's the same. It's been pretty much the same throughout the entire games. So I think they need to iterate on that somewhat, so that, again, the combat in the next game doesn't just feel so mindless as it does in this game and the previous games. Like, it might be cool to have some sort of some sort of like weakness, like kind of rock paper scissors mechanic, where if a guy is using a hammer, then you have to use a shield against him. Like, maybe you can switch between weapons on the fly, and if the guy's using a hammer, you have to use a shield, and if someone else is using a shield, you have to use a hammer, something like that. Or if someone's using a lance, you have to use a bow and arrow, just to add like a little bit of complexity to it, to make you think during combat, rather than it just being quite mindless. So I think that's the thing that I would iterate on and like to see in the next game. So thank you guys for the questions, and this is something I want to do in general with the podcast in the future. So every time we review a game, I'll either ask in the Discord if anyone has questions, or I'll ask on Twitter. So I suggest you join us in the Discord. If you have Discord, you can get there via the link in the description, or you can follow me on Twitter at SwitchIndieFix, and the link is also in the description for that. So to round off the review, there are some little problems I want to talk about. One that isn't a problem actually is the game ran exceedingly well through my entire playthrough. I played on the Xbox Series S, ran like butter, looked great, very good experience. My one bit of feedback, what we talked about in one of the questions, was the size of the map, and that it felt like I'd seen everything really quickly. So that's one bit of kind of constructive criticism I would have about the game. And there are two other things in the game that I really wish were different. The first one is leveling up items. So leveling up items is a key part of the game to make sure you're keeping up with the difficulty curve of the game. And how leveling up works is you go to a blacksmith, you can level up items, and it costs gold, and obviously you can only level items up as far as you have gold to pay for the levels, basically. And gold, I felt like you have a lot of it very quickly in the game. So it usually meant whenever you went to the blacksmith, you could upgrade a couple of levels at a time, but the game only lets you do it one at a time, which was very frustrating because it's a lot of just spamming A and getting through the dialogue and the animation and everything to get to the level where you were. Like leveling up to, like, if you wanted to level up like five levels, it would take him probably like a minute and a half to actually do it. So it was very slow, very boring. I wish there was kind of like a system where you could just like toggle up like how many levels you wanted to go, and it would let you do it until you ran out of money. That would have been cool, and it would have been better because you would spend less time in the blacksmiths and more time out in the world, either slaying pirates or exploring the Purribean. And the second thing that I wasn't the biggest fan of was the game's checkpoint system. So the game doesn't really autosave that often. So you have these kind of checkpoints, it's like save points dotted around the map, and it's like a parrot on a kind of like a wooden post where you can save or you can start co-op. And it was kind of annoying because sometimes what you would do is you would save on one island, get on your boat, sail across the map to another island, end up fighting an enemy that would kill you, and then you'd respawn all the way back on the other side of the map. It just felt a bit tedious sometimes. It was also the case sometimes in caves. You might get quite far in a cave and die and then get respawned right at the start of the cave again. It would have been nice, I think, to have more regular auto save points. That's, again, these 2 points are just really small. Otherwise, I think the game was really, really good. So that leads us on to the most important question about the game, which is, should you play Cat Quest III? Well, in short, absolutely you should. The game is described as one of the best indie games of 2024, and I personally wouldn't go so far as saying that. I think the game is much of more of the same as its predecessors, and in the wider video game industry, it does not push the bar of indie games as much as others like Harold Halibut, Dungeons of Hinterberg, or Thank Goodness You're Here have this year. Nevertheless, the game is still very, very good. It's by far the best in the series, feels extremely polished, and is a great time to play. Its stories and characters are charming, silly, and the story, like this review, is full of cat puns. Furthermore, the feeling of comfort food is strong with this game, meaning its loop and easygoing experience might get you addicted to it, making you blaze through it in just a couple of days like I did. So I really think if you're interested in the game, you should definitely try it out. I think it's about €19.99 right now, which I think is a good price for it. It's like I said, I don't think it's one of the best indie games of the year because it does a lot of stuff we've already seen in this series, and they took a lot of that from a lot of other series that have previously come out, like Final Fantasy or Zelda. So I don't think it's really like pushing the bar at all. But I think it's nevertheless a great game, a lot of fun to play, great writing, beautiful art, addictive gameplay, lots of loot. It really layers it on, and it's a really, really good game to play, so I would definitely suggest it. And also the other two games, I would suggest you play those too, because the other two are kind of, again, short and simple. I think recently they've been on sale on Steam for like a couple of euros, so you might be able to pick them up cheaply there. So definitely make sure you check out the Cat Quest series if you haven't done so already. And you can go to my Ko-fi, so it's like ko-fi.com/Beat Your Backlog. My 2 reviews are there. My review for Cat Quest 3 will be there as well, so you can check those out if you're interested. And guys, thank you for listening to episode 41 of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. I'd love to know if you've played Cat Quest 3 or any of the other Cat Quest games. If you have, you can let me know on Spotify by commenting on the episode, which is kind of like below the description. Or if you're listening elsewhere, you can let me know on social media by @me @switchingdefix on Twitter/X, or at me BYB_podcast on Instagram. Or of course, you can join the Discord where the link is in the description. And if you're in the mood to listen to more content about an amazing RPG with gorgeous art, make sure you check out episode 36 of the podcast about Paper Mario and the Thousand Year Door. So guys, again, I just want to remind you that Beat Your Backlog is a new podcast and needs your support. If you enjoyed the episode, please consider subscribing and following wherever you're listening, and leaving us a 5-star review. And thanks a lot guys. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.